The click of the front door was the first note of the end. It wasn't a slam, not a violent, angry sound that would have at least matched the chaos that was about to unfold. It was a quiet, deliberate click, the sound of someone closing a chapter with a chilling finality. I looked up from the novel I was pretending to read, the words blurring on the page, and saw Mark standing in the foyer. His briefcase was in one hand, but his posture was different. There was a rigidity to his shoulders, a ghost of a person I didn't recognize. "Helen, we need to talk," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. I didn't know the specifics, but I knew the tone. It was the same tone my father had used when he told my mother he was leaving, the tone that prefaces a sentence that will change the entire geometry of your life. My heart, a traitorous organ, began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic Morse code of dread. "What is it, Mark? You're scaring me." I closed the book, my fingers leaving faint prints on the cover. I'd been reading the same page for 20 minutes anyway. My mind had been elsewhere, in a fog of mundane worry about dinner, about his long hours at the office, about the new expensive cologne I'd caught a whiff of on his shirts. My gut had been trying to tell me something for months, but I'd been so skilled at silencing it. He walked into the living room and sat down in the armchair across from the sofa, putting a physical distance between us that felt deliberate and cruel. He placed his briefcase on the floor and looked at me, his eyes like chips of cold, grey stone. This was not the man I had married. This was a stranger wearing my husband's face. "I've met someone else," he stated. No preamble, no "I'm sorry." Just a clinical fact delivered with the detachment of a man reading a quarterly report. "It's Amanda Sterling." The name hit me like a physical blow. Amanda Sterling, his boss, the impossibly glamorous, sharp-witted woman who ran his department with an iron fist and a flawless smile. I had met her at company Christmas parties, felt her dismissive gaze sweep over me as if I were a piece of furniture. I had watched the way her long, manicured fingers would touch Mark's arm, a little too familiar, a little too proprietary. I had pushed those observations aside, chalking them up to my own insecurities, my own inadequacies. I was a writer, a creator of worlds. She was a corporate titan. We occupied different orbits. "The CEO's daughter," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "So that's it, you're leaving me for her." "It's not about her father," he said, a flicker of something, was it annoyance, crossing his face. "It's about her. She's electric. We have a connection that's extraordinary. She understands my ambition. She pushes me." "And I don't," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I just make your dinner and fold your laundry." "Helen, please don't make this into a scene," he sighed, as if my emotional devastation was an inconvenience. "We've just grown apart. It's not working. It hasn't been for a while. This is just a formal acknowledgement of reality." 3 years, I said, my voice finally cracking. "We've been married for 3 years. Grown apart, is that what we're calling it? I've been waiting for you to come home every night, worried sick about your health, trying to be the perfect wife, and you call that growing apart." He stood up, running a hand through his dark hair. It was a familiar gesture, one I used to find endearing. Now it seemed performative, a show of exasperation. "We own the house. I've had the papers drawn up. I'll be fair. You can have the house." "Have the house," I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "What am I supposed to do with this big, empty house, Mark? What am I supposed to do with my life?" "You're a writer," he said, as if that was the answer to all my problems. "You can write anywhere. This is a fantastic opportunity for you. You've always said you wanted to write a novel. Now you have the time and the space. This is a positive move for both of us." He was gaslighting me, twisting the narrative to make his betrayal seem like a gift, a mutual parting of ways for our mutual benefit. I saw it then for what it was, the cold, ruthless calculus of a man who had rewritten our history to absolve himself of guilt. "I want you out by the end of the week," he said. "I've already found a place." He pulled a set of keys from his pocket and tossed them on the coffee table. "My new keys, Amanda's condo." The keys landed with a soft clink, the sound of a death knell. My whole world, the life I had carefully, lovingly built, shattered into a million pieces around me. He picked up his briefcase and walked to the door. He paused, one hand on the handle, and for a moment I foolishly thought he might turn around, that this was a mistake, that the man I loved was still in there somewhere. "We'll talk details later," he said, and then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. For a long time I just sat there, staring at the closed door. The silence in the house was deafening. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock we'd bought at an antique market on our first anniversary, its rhythm mocking me. A part of me felt shattered, broken into 1,000 pieces, each piece a memory of a life that was now a lie. Another part of me, a smaller, quieter part, began to scream. Not a scream of sorrow, but of outrage. This was not a compromise. This was not a mutual decision. He had made a choice, and he had thrown me away like garbage. The following days were a blur of paperwork, packing, and soul-crushing grief. My friends rallied around me, bringing casseroles and tissues, offering their shoulders and their outrage. My sister, Clara, was my rock. She helped me pack his things, her movements sharp and efficient, muttering curses under her breath the entire time. "He's a fool, Helen," she said, hefting a box of his books. "A complete and utter fool. He's left a diamond for a cubic zirconia. She's a sociopath, everyone knows it." I tried to laugh, but it got stuck in my throat. "He thinks she's electric." "She's electric because she signs his paycheck," Clara scoffed. "Wait until the novelty wears off. Wait until he realizes she's never going to be there for him when he's sick, never going to take care of him. She's all ambition and Botox. That's not a wife, that's a career move." Her words were a balm, but they couldn't soothe the raw, gaping wound in my chest. I was grieving. I was grieving the loss of my husband, the loss of my future, the loss of the person I was when I was with him. I had been Mark's wife for so long that I'd forgotten who Helen was. The house felt enormous and empty without him. I'd wander from room to room, my hand trailing across the furniture, the walls, as if trying to absorb the ghost of the happiness we had shared. I'd find myself in his office, staring at the empty desk, the bookshelf, the photo of us at our wedding. In the photo, we were laughing. I looked happy. I looked like a woman who thought her life was on track. That woman seemed like a stranger now. It was in that room, a week after he'd left, that I broke down. Not a dignified, gentle weeping, but a full-body, ugly cry that tore out of me from the very depths of my soul. I slid down the wall and sobbed, the sound echoing in the empty house. I cried for the future that was stolen from me, the dreams we had shared, the family we had planned. I cried for the years I had wasted trying to be perfect for a man who wasn't even looking. I cried because I was terrified. Terrified of being alone, terrified of starting over, terrified of being a failure. But when the tears finally stopped, a strange calm descended upon me. The screaming part of me, the part that had been silent, finally had room to breathe. It was a slow, dawning realization that in his leaving he had given me a gift. The worst gift imaginable, but a gift nonetheless. He had given me back myself. He had stripped away the title of wife and left me with the raw, complicated, terrifying potential of me. I looked around the room. The study was supposed to be his, but the books were mostly mine. My writing manuals, my favorite novels, my collection of poetry. This was my room. I just hadn't realized it. With a surge of defiance, I decided to take it back. I spent the next few weeks redecorating. I painted the walls a warm, vibrant teal, a color he would have hated. I replaced the heavy, masculine desk with a beautiful antique escritoire I found at a flea market. I brought in plants, filled the room with natural light, and turned it into a sanctuary. I was done being an accessory to someone else's life. I was going to build my own. The divorce was surprisingly quick. His lawyer was efficient, his desire to sever ties with his past life was apparently more important than the money. I got the house, a decent settlement, and a deep, abiding disdain for lawyers. When the final papers were signed, I felt a wave of relief. It was over. The chapter was closed. I was free. I threw myself into my writing. The idea I'd been carrying around for years finally had the space to grow. It was a novel about a woman who loses everything and finds herself in the process. It was, predictably, a little autobiographical, but I didn't care. It was my story, my truth, my catharsis. The words poured out of me, a torrent of emotion I'd been holding back for years. I wrote in the mornings, took walks in the afternoon, and edited in the evenings. I started living again. I started taking care of myself. I joined a yoga class, reconnected with old friends, and started cooking again, not for someone else but for myself. One evening, about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I was curled up on the sofa, reading an early draft of my manuscript when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach flip. Mark. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the decline button. I hadn't spoken to him since the day he'd left. I'd been ignoring his few brief texts. What could he possibly want? Was he gloating? Did he need more paperwork? Curiosity, that fatal flaw, got the better of me. I answered, "Yes, Mark." My voice was cool, distant, a voice I barely recognized. "Helen," his voice was strained, a thin, desperate sound that was a far cry from the confident, detached tone he'd used with me 3 months earlier. Helen, thank God you answered. What do you want, Mark? I repeated, a note of impatience creeping in. I wasn't the patient, dutiful wife anymore. I didn't have to be. I need to see you, he said. I made a terrible mistake, a horrible, catastrophic mistake. I need to talk to you, please. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. A terrible mistake. The irony was so rich it was almost laughable. A mistake? You left me for your boss. You threw away a 3-year marriage for a woman you barely knew. And now, 3 months later, you're calling it a mistake. What happened, Mark? Did the glamour of the CEO's daughter not live up to the hype? It's not like that, he pleaded. Amanda is, she's not who I thought she was. She's cold, Helen, she's all business, no heart. She treated me like an assistant. She expected me to be at her beck and call 24 hours a day. She wouldn't let me see my friends. She hated that I had a past. She tried to turn me into a puppet. I listened, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. I had pictured this moment. I had imagined the satisfaction of hearing him beg, of seeing him realize the depth of his folly. But now that it was happening, it didn't feel satisfying. It just felt sad, pathetic. And you thought you could just walk back into my life? I said, the anger I'd been suppressing for months finally rising to the surface. You thought you could just pick up where you left off, that I'd be sitting here, pinning for you, waiting for you to come to your senses. I was hoping we could talk, he said, his voice trembling. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, I know I hurt you in the worst possible way, but I realized something, Helen. I realized that what I had with you was real, it was true, it was genuine. Amanda, she was just a fantasy. A mirage, she was everything I thought I wanted, but she was nothing compared to you. You're real, Helen, you're good and kind and strong. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid, too selfish to see it. His words were like honey, sweet and cloying, and I almost gagged on them. This wasn't a confession of love, it was a desperate attempt to reclaim a safety net he had foolishly thrown away. He hadn't realized his love for me, he had realized that the grass wasn't greener. He had realized that being a trophy husband to a powerful woman wasn't as fun as being worshipped by a devoted wife. He was a man running back to the shore after almost drowning in a sea of his own ambition. I'll be honest with you, Mark, I said, my voice steady. There was a time a few months ago that I would have given anything to hear you say those words. I would have forgiven you in a heartbeat. I would have welcomed you back with open arms, and I would have spent the rest of my life trying to be good enough for you. I paused, taking a deep breath. But I'm not that woman anymore. You broke me, Mark. You broke me in a way I didn't think was possible. But in the aftermath, when I was picking up the pieces, I discovered something. I discovered that I can be a lot stronger, a lot more resilient than I ever gave myself credit for. I discovered that I don't need you to be happy. I discovered that I'm happier without you. There was a choked sound on the other end of the line. Helen, please, I'm begging you, just let me see you. Let me explain in person. We can work this out. We can start over. I promise I've changed, I've learned my lesson. No, Mark, I said, my voice firm. You haven't changed. You've just realized that you're not as powerful as you thought you were. You're not a man who made a mistake. You're a man who was made a fool of. And now you want to come back to the safe, comfortable life you gave up because it was too mundane for your grand ambitions. Helen, you're not being fair, he whined. You're not listening to me. I've listened to you for 3 years, Mark, I said. And I listened to you very clearly 3 months ago when you told me I was just a stepping stone on your way to a better life. You made your choice. You chose ambition and status over love and partnership, and you have to live with that choice. I will do anything, Helen, anything. I'll go to counseling, I'll give up anything, just please give me another chance. I can't breathe without you. I realize now that you were my rock, my anchor. I am lost without you. I found myself starting to waver just for a second. This was the man I had loved, the man I had slept beside for 3 years. I remembered his laugh, his touch, the way he would hold me when I was scared. A sliver of pity pierced through my armor. No, I whispered, forcing the word out. I can't. Please, he begged again, his voice cracking. Please, Helen, I'm on my knees. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mark, I said, my voice gentle but resolute. But I have to say goodbye now, and this time it's really goodbye. He started to say something else, but I ended the call. I put the phone down on the coffee table and stared at it, my hands trembling slightly. I had done it. I had stood up for myself. I had rejected the man who had broken my heart, and it felt empowering. It didn't feel vindictive. It felt like a choice I had made for myself, for my own well-being. I sat back on the sofa, the silence of the house no longer a symbol of loneliness but of peace. I realized then that the love I had felt for him was gone. In its place was a quiet, unyielding self-respect. I had loved a man who didn't deserve my love, and I had wasted years trying to be something for him that he never truly appreciated. I was done being defined by his rejection. I was going to define myself. The next morning I woke up feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in months. The sun was streaming through the window, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel the crushing weight of the past on my chest. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at my escritoire and looked at the words on the screen. My story. A story about a woman who lost her husband and found herself. A woman who went from being a wife to being a warrior. A woman who realized that the worst thing that ever happened to her was the best thing that ever happened to her. The words began to flow again. The final chapters were the most powerful. It was the story of her rebirth, her triumph, her victory. It was my victory. My book was published a year later. It wasn't a massive bestseller, but it found its audience. The reviews were kind, the letters from readers were touching. They said they saw themselves in the story. They saw their own pain, their own struggles, their own journeys toward healing. It became more than just a book. It became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. A few months after the book was published, I was invited to a literary festival in the city. It was a small event, a panel discussion with a few other debut authors. I was nervous but excited. This was my new life. This was my world. I was sitting at the signing table after my panel talking to a reader when I saw him. Mark. He was standing at the back of the hall, a lost, sheepish look on his face. He looked thinner, older, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. The arrogance was gone. In its place was a quiet desperation. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I had blocked his number, deleted him from my social media. I thought he had finally given up. But here he was, invading my space, trying to reclaim a piece of my life once again. I finished my conversation, smiled at the reader and excused myself. I walked over to him, my heart thumping but not with fear, with anger. "What are you doing here, Mark?" I demanded, my voice low and sharp. "I came to see you," he said, his eyes pleading. "I saw your name in the paper, I had to come, I just wanted to tell you. Congratulations, I'm so proud of you." "Save your congratulations," I snapped. "And save your patronizing, I don't want your pride, I don't want anything from you." "I know," he said, his head hanging low. "I know I have no right to be here, but I just wanted to see you, succeeding, to see you happy. You look amazing, Helen, you look happier than I've ever seen you." "That's because I am," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I am happy, Mark, more than I ever was with you." "I know," he repeated. "I know, and I'm glad you made something of yourself. I know that's because of me. Not because of my support, but because of my cruelty. I'm the villain in your story, and I deserve to be." "Yes," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "You are the villain, but the story isn't about you anymore. It's about me. It's about the woman who rose from the ashes of the life you destroyed and built a better one." He nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. I miss you, I miss what we had." I felt a surge of pity for him. He was a broken man, a man who had thrown away the best thing in his life for a fleeting illusion of power. But I couldn't let myself fall back into the trap of being his caretaker. I had learned that lesson the hard way. "You don't miss me," I said gently. "You miss the way I made you feel, you miss the comfort and the stability, but you didn't love me. You loved what I did for you. And I've realized that I deserve more than that. I deserve someone who loves me for who I am, not for what I can provide." "I know I can't change the past," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "but I wish I could take it all back." "I know you do," I said, a genuine, heartfelt smile spreading across my face. "And I forgive you, I truly, honestly forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because holding on to that anger was holding me back. I have let you go, Mark, I have let all of it go." He looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Does that mean—" "No," I said, shaking my head firmly. "It doesn't mean that. It means I'm finally free. It means I'm ready to move on with my life, but it doesn't mean I'm moving back." He hung his head again, the last vestiges of hope draining from his face. "I understand," he whispered. "Goodbye, Mark," I said, turning away. "Take care of yourself." I walked back to my table, my head held high. I didn't look back, I didn't need to. The past was where it belonged, in the rearview mirror. That night I went home to my beautiful house. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my sofa and looked at the life I had built. It wasn't the life I had planned, it was so much better. It was a life I had built for myself, a life I had fought for, a life I was proud of. The scars from my marriage would always be there, a part of my story, but they were no longer open wounds. They were faded lines on a map of a journey I had survived. I knew that my next chapter was going to be even more amazing. I was no longer waiting for someone to complete my story. I was the author now, and I was just getting started. The ending of my marriage wasn't the end of my life. It was the prologue to a far more extraordinary tale, and I couldn't wait to see what came next.